Hello and welcome. You're watching A News. I'm James Ezimoha. Let's see your headlines. Lebanon announces partial ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, but attacks continue. Massive Russian attack on cities across Ukraine kills at least 14 people. And gunman kills 6 people and then himself in Iowa mass shooting. A new U.S.-backed arrangement may ease tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, but questions remain over how long the calm will last. Despite public commitments to stop attacks, fresh clashes on the ground highlight the fragility of the situation.
Lebanon says Hezbollah has accepted a U.S. proposal to halt attacks on Israel in exchange for an end to Israeli strikes on Beirut's southern suburbs. Lebanese embassy in Washington says it received confirmation of Hezbollah's acceptance and that the arrangement could later be expanded to cover all Lebanese territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed the agreement but warned that strikes on Beirut would resume if Hezbollah continued attacking Israeli cities and civilians. He also said Israeli forces would continue planned operations in southern Lebanon. The announcement followed comments by U.S. President Donald Trump, who said he had spoken with both Netanyahu and Hezbollah representatives and that they had agreed to stop all shooting. Despite that, clashes continued. Hezbollah said it launched 3 attacks on Israeli tanks and soldiers near 2 villages in northern Israel using drones and artillery. Earlier, Netanyahu ordered strikes on what Israel called terror targets in Beirut's southern suburbs after rocket and drone attacks by the Iran-backed group. The escalation drew sharp warnings from Iran. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the U.S.-Iran ceasefire applies to all fronts, including Lebanon, and warned that any violation could jeopardize the broader truce. Iranian media also reported that Tehran may suspend indirect talks with Washington if Israeli military action in Lebanon continues. President Trump, meanwhile, said Israel would not send ground troops into Beirut. The United Nations expressed deep concern. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said Israeli warnings of imminent strikes had increased fear and uncertainty among civilians in Lebanon. Addressing the Security Council, UN Assistant Secretary General Martha Amma Akia-Pobi said both sides were contributing to a dangerous escalation that threatens diplomatic efforts, direct talks between Lebanon and Israel, and hopes for a permanent ceasefire.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump says he remains optimistic that a ceasefire agreement with Iran can be secured soon, despite signs of growing tensions. Reports suggest Tehran has suspended indirect talks with Washington and is considering a full blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to ABC News, Trump said he expects an agreement within the next week to extend the current ceasefire and reopen the key shipping route. He said only a few issues remain unresolved and described a potential deal as better than a military victory. Now, Iran has strongly condemned what it termed the continuous violation of the ceasefire by Israel and the U.S., warning against its negative consequences on the regional peace and security. Our correspondent Turash Velilu has more.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry has slammed repeated instances of ceasefire violations, which is said are committed by the United States in Iran's southern waters, as well as by Israel in Lebanon, warning over backlashes for the peace and security in the region. In a statement, the ministry recalled the ceasefire agreement reached in April, stressing that the Israel-U.S. war with Iran shall be stopped in all fronts, including in Lebanon. It also reiterated that Iran will defend its interests wherever necessary and with all its might in accordance with the inherent right of legitimate self-defense. Also, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Monday that any violation of the ceasefire between Iran and the United States on one front, including Lebanon, would be regarded as a breach of the truce across all fronts. In a post on the social platform X, he said that the United States and Israel would bear responsibility for the consequences of any breach of the truce. Amid the fragile ceasefire, Araghchi held phone calls with his counterparts from Belgium, France, Pakistan, Qatar, and Turkey, as well as Pakistani army chief, who is acting as the mediator between Iran and the United States. Following weeks of stalled talks, Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai blamed the U.S. shifts in stance and contradictory demands for protracted negotiations. He stressed that Iran entered the talks with the U.S. out of complete lack of trust, rejecting news that Tehran and Washington have reached an agreement on an extended peace deal. Quick question, he replied that the ongoing indirect talks do not deal with Iran's civilian nuclear program, adding that the parties are focusing on ending the war at the moment. Meantime, President Masoud Pezeshkian held a phone call with the Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. According to the presidential office, their conversation focused on regional de-escalation, the safety of international shipping lanes, particularly the Strait of Hormuz, and broader economic and technical cooperation between Tehran and Tokyo. Huray Shiralilu, reporting from downtown Tehran for A News.
Now, a rally in Tehran has drawn attention in public support for Lebanon and Hezbollah at a sensitive moment in regional diplomacy. The demonstration came as Lebanese officials said Hezbollah had accepted a U.S. proposal for reciprocal halt to attacks with Israel.
Demonstrators gathered in Tehran on Monday night in support of Lebanon and Hezbollah, waving Iranian and Hezbollah flags during a rally in the capital. The gathering came as Lebanese officials said Hezbollah had accepted a U.S. proposal for a reciprocal halt to attacks with Israel. U.S. President Donald Trump also said he had communicated with Hezbollah through intermediaries and received a pledge that the group would not attack Israel. At the rally, some protesters said Iran had a duty to stand with Lebanon.
The Lebanese stood by the Iranians in Iran's darkest moments and supported us. You could say they brought themselves into this war, and they should be supported. In my view, every one of us has a responsibility toward them.
Because from the very beginning, we said that we stand with Lebanon, that we will not abandon Lebanon.
The rally reflected support among those gathered for Iran's regional allies, even as diplomatic efforts continued around the proposed halt in hostilities. The proposal has not ended the uncertainty around the conflict, but the rally in Tehran showed the strength of feeling among supporters of Lebanon and Hezbollah as the region waits to see whether the US-backed plan will hold.
Now to Ukraine. Overnight, Russian missile and drone barrages have hit major cities across the country, killing at least 14 people and injuring over 100 others. Here's more.
Russia launched one of its largest missile and drone attacks in recent months, striking cities across Ukraine and killing at least 13 people while injuring dozens, including children. The overnight barrage hit Kyiv, Dnipro, Kharkiv and Zaporizhia. Air raid warnings were issued across most of the country as explosions and drone activity continued through the night. In Kiev, drones and ballistic missiles struck multiple districts. Fires broke out across the capital following the attacks, and part of a 9-story apartment building collapsed. A medical clinic was also damaged.
There was such a loud explosion and a flash that lit up everything, and immediately thick grey smoke rose up.
I think Russia does not want to end the war. It continues to terrorize Ukraine, kill our people, and destroy our buildings and civilian infrastructure. This is a crime. It is truly a crime.
Emergency crews searched through rubble for survivors as blackouts were reported in parts of Kiev, with residents sheltering in subway stations and underground spaces during the strikes. Dnipro was among the hardest hit areas, with local authorities reporting multiple fatalities and dozens of injuries as rescue teams worked through destroyed buildings to reach those trapped. In Kharkiv, several people, including a child, were injured, while an industrial facility was struck in Zaporizhzhia. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched more than 650 drones and 73 missiles, including ballistic, cruise and anti-ship types, with most intercepted, though some reaching their targets. The attack came after days of heightened tension and warnings of a larger assault.
Now, authorities in the U.S. state of Iowa say a domestic dispute has led to the deaths of 6 people. This comes as the suspect, who police say had a criminal record, took his own life after a confrontation with officers.
6 people were killed in the U.S. state of Iowa on Monday following a shooting spree. Authorities say the suspect, identified as Ryan Willis McFarland, later died from a self-inflicted wound after being confronted by officers. The victims are believed to be members of his family.
The adult male suspect had left the residence prior to law enforcement's arrival, but was quickly identified as Ryan Willis McFarland, 52 years, Muscatine, Iowa. Officers located McFarland on the Riverfront Trail near the pedestrian bridge. While talking to Ryan Willis McFarland, he took his own life. Officers and EMS personnel rendered aid, however, he was pronounced deceased at the scene.
The shootings took place at multiple locations across the city of Muscatine. Authorities say the suspect had a prior criminal record. An investigation has been launched, with preliminary findings indicating the shooting stemmed from a domestic dispute.
During the initial stages of the investigation, information was developed indicating that there may be additional victims. Officers subsequently located an adult male deceased from an apparent gunshot wound inside his residence at 1509 Mill Street in Muscatine, Iowa. Officers then responded to a business located at 808 Grandview Avenue, where they discovered another male deceased from an apparent gunshot wound. The preliminary investigation indicates the shooting stemmed from a domestic dispute. At this time, all victims are believed to be family members of the deceased.
In a post on social media, Muscatine Mayor Brad Bark described the incident as tragic and offered his condolences to the family involved. Authorities say there is currently no active threat to the community.
Now, military officials from the United States and China met in Hawaii to discuss ways to improve safety and communication during air and maritime encounters. Manu Makdom has more from Beijing.
Representatives from the Chinese and U.S. militaries met in Hawaii from May 28 to 29 and held what the Chinese Navy described as candid and constructive exchanges on air and maritime safety. According to the Chinese side, both countries agreed that maintaining communication can help reduce misunderstandings, avoid miscalculations, and enhance professionalism during military encounters. China also stressed its firm opposition to any actions that undermine its sovereignty and safety. For its part, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said that the discussions focused on reducing the risk of unsafe and unprofessional interactions between the two militaries. The meeting was held in Honolulu and brought together representatives from the People's Liberation Army and the U.S. military. The talks followed the last month's summit between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump in Beijing, where the two leaders agreed to pursue what they called a constructive relationship of strategic stability. Analysts said that the agreement could help establish clearer boundaries for managing competition and preventing crises. The meeting also comes after the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Forum in Singapore, where U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth voiced concerns over China's military modernization while calling on Asian countries to strengthen their defense capabilities. At the same time, Hegseth noted that U.S.-China relations are in a better state than they have been in years. Both sides agreed to continue communication through military channels, with observers viewing such exchanges as an important mechanism for maintaining stability and avoiding unintended incidents in the region. Manu Makdum, A News, Beijing.
Now, global displacement has reached a record high, with over 117 million people forced to leave their homes. That's according to a new report from the Bonn International Center for Conflict Studies. The figure has doubled in 10 years. The report says most displaced people stay within their own regions or neighboring countries, mainly in poorer nations, while countries like Germany are tightening immigration rules. It also finds climate change is a major driver, with about 30 million people displaced in 2025 due to extreme weather. Researchers also say a mix of political conflict, economic stress, and inequality is fueling the rise. The United Nations Weather Agency says a developing El Nino could raise temperatures and increase the risk of extreme weather in months ahead as warming Pacific waters signal changing conditions. The World Meteorological Organization forecasts above average temperatures in most parts of the world from June through August, with conditions likely to continue until November. Officials say warmer oceans can intensify heat waves and heavy rainfall while disrupting regional climate patterns. The WMO says uncertainty remains, with some models not predicting a strong El Nino.
Warmer ocean adds heat and moisture to the climate system, which can serve to worsen climate extremes, including heat waves and heavy rainfall. The strong El Niño of 2023-2024 added a temporary warming effect on top of an already long-term warming trend. This contributed to 2024 becoming the hottest year on record.
All right, after the break, we'll examine Russia's latest large-scale strikes on Ukraine and the broader questions they raise about the direction of the war. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, Russia says its latest wave of strikes was retaliation for what it describes as Ukrainian terrorist actions against targets deep inside Russian-controlled territory and critical energy infrastructure. Meantime, reports suggest growing public support for peace talks inside Russia. Joining us now to discuss this is John Kevulik, senior editor at Issue Insights, joining us from St. Petersburg, Russia. Thank you for joining us, sir.
You're welcome.
Now, Russia says these strikes were retaliation for attacks on its energy infrastructure. How has Ukraine discovered a pressure point that hurts Moscow more than battlefield losses?
It seems that they have. During the last 5 years, the Ukrainian army has been constrained. It's been constrained, one, because of its own capacity, its ability to develop military equipment and then to put it into the field. And then secondly, because of those countries that have been providing money and providing equipment to Ukraine, they have said, we're going to have restrictions on what you can do with it. And the number one restriction is generally don't kill Russian civilians. We know you want to kill them because they're killing your civilians, but you can't be like them. And if you start becoming like them, then we're going to withdraw support. And that meant the Ukrainians had to develop their own capacity, and they have. And they've developed drones, missiles, and rockets that can now penetrate several thousand kilometers into Russian territory. And they've been focusing on infrastructure, primarily energy infrastructure, because that's where Russia gets most of its money. It's a very smart, strategic focus. But they've also been going after infrastructure that sometimes can have dual use. And there have been some Russian civilian casualties. That's where President Putin has to respond, because he just can't let that go unresponded. And so Ukraine may by mistake kill 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 Russians, but Russia will deliberately look to go after civilians. And if they kill 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, that's fine with them because that's a part of their strategy.
Mm-hmm. Now, for much of the war, Russia's oil and gas network appeared untouchable. What changes when strategic economic assets now become part of the battlefield?
Well, number one is, Russia has to think more carefully about how it protects these assets. And the more protection those assets need from Ukraine, the less those assets can be used for other purposes, meaning trying to get more territory in Ukraine, trying to prevent Ukraine from taking back territory that the Russians currently occupy. And so, it accomplishes that goal, redirecting assets. And then the other is it's an economic cost. And it's an economic cost to Russia because the less oil they can pump, the less natural gas they can process, the less of both they can deliver. That means the less money that's coming in. And then thirdly, which is what Ukraine's trying to do, is bring the war to Russia. Because for most Russians, and I travel throughout the country, the war isn't the same as it is for Ukraine, because Ukraine isn't blowing up hospitals and schools and trains and apartment buildings. And so the Russian people really don't, other than economically, they haven't really felt any pain. And so now Ukraine is sending drones over airports. So that's disrupting air travel, sending them over railroad switches. That's causing railway inconvenience. Sending them over, not hitting apartments, sending them over apartments. That's scaring people. So they're trying to, have the Russian people have a stake in this. The one challenge from that is then Russian President Vladimir Putin feels that he not only has to respond, but he has to respond more. And that means more Ukrainians get killed.
Mm-hmm. Now, Moscow continues to speak confidently about battlefield advances, yet reports suggest it may be exploring pathways to negotiations. What does that tell us now?
Well, both countries have been backing into each other with respect to negotiations now for 5 years. Last year was the best year, where there were 3 opportunities where the countries were close. Thing could have happened, but the problem was that the closer a somewhat resolution, at least a cessation of the military component of the war, the closer that became, some of the constituencies that really don't want anything settled unless it's settled on their terms started to be disruptors, and therefore it didn't happen. But both sides are lying. Ukraine and Russia do lie. That's a part of the propaganda. So it's not a criticism. That's what they do. They don't want their people to know the full extent of how many people are dead or wounded, the extent of monetary damage. And so they both sort of talk past each other. But Russia is feeling it. The economy, it isn't collapsing, but it's degrading. And it's degrading at a faster pace. And young people are feeling it. Young people are watching their salaries decrease. They're watching prices in stores increase. Unemployment's tipping up. More people are trying to leave, figuring that their generation isn't going to be able to fulfill their potential here. And so that's creating a problem for the government. But President Putin's got to figure out a way. How do you embrace negotiation without looking like you're a loser? And there are a lot of ways he can do that. And the easiest one is to simply say, 5 years ago, we were fighting Ukraine. 5 years later, we're fighting Ukraine, we're fighting NATO, we're fighting the European Union, we're fighting the United Nations, we're fighting everybody, and we've done pretty well. So let's call it a day. We have 20% of Ukraine. But he still wants this roughly 10% of Donetsk that the Russians don't have. He's fixated on it. He's saying, I'll give up everything else, or I won't give it up. I'll stop trying to get any more. I just want all of Donetsk, so I have 100% of it. One discussion is moving the border of Donetsk from where it is in Ukraine to where the Russians are. That way the Russians can say, we have 100%. Ukraine hasn't given anything away. We'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Lavender Center says 62% of Russians support peace talks. Is that a meaningful political signal or just simply war fatigue after years of conflict?
It's a combination of all of it. I'm a little suspect of that number because you have older Russians whose lives really haven't changed that much. If they're 60, 70, or 80, their lives really hasn't been that much different in the last 40, 50 years. And the last 25 years, Vladimir Putin's been in the Kremlin. There is a growing constituency that wants the Russian government to do more, to finish Ukraine. Stop pussyfooting around, and we've got all of these weapons, then let's use them. Why do we have them if we're not going to use them? And I'm not saying nuclear weapons, but just if we've got thousands of missiles and rockets and drones, let's just launch them all at once and finish this. But the younger generations, the people who are looking to try to have a future, those who are eligible to serve in the military, so they're eligible to be drafted or that, they're on the other side of that plane, which is make a deal because this is just too costly. And some of it's practical. We can't go on vacation where we want to go anymore. Our currency is all over the place. We just face enormous restrictions and the sanctions. So you're killing the future of a generation. So I'm not so sure it's at 60% that want to make a deal, because what they want the deal to be is different. But I will say, there's a constituency that wants it to stop, and that's a vast majority of Russians. They want it over. It's just how it gets over is where there's some disagreement.
Now, finally, sir, in your opinion, do you think the war would end based on this complaints from within the country about how the war is progressing, or about how the world sees Russia in terms of how long the war has prolonged?
Yeah, your question dovetails right into why I'm in St. Petersburg for the next several days, which is SPIEF, the annual St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which is President Putin's Davos, Switzerland conference. It's bringing people from all over Russia together, the companies, the government officials, companies from outside of Russia, delegations from other countries. It's basically President Putin saying, the last 5 years, because it's shrunk every year, that we're still here, people still want to engage with us, and we're still open for business, and business is good. But every year we see less senior executives from fewer of the huge global companies. The foreign delegations aren't the top tier in terms of country, and then in terms of the actual representation, they're lower tier. And most of the activities, the exhibition halls are incredible, the displays are amazing, the organization is really well done, but it's mostly people interacting with each other and Russians interacting with each other. So they need to show up because the government's looking to see who's spending money on a booth, who's spending money to come in that. So to merge all of that, and does this put any pressure on the government? President Putin is hearing every day that the economy isn't healthy, that it is degrading. But because it's not, it's corroding, but because it's not off a cliff, it's harder to convince him to make a deal, to stop this, because he feels if I just have a little more time, and his generals are telling him, all we need is a little more time, we can finish this. But then there's a simple reality. We're now over into the 5th year, and for about 4 years, Russia hasn't really gained any territory. So for Russian people, they look at the map and this isn't moving, but they look at their economy and it's corroding, and they look at the rest of the world and they look at Ukraine, and Ukraine's surviving and now is getting more funds from the European Union. I don't think that we're at the moment where President Putin says to his team, cut a deal, cut our losses, we're out of here. But we're on that trajectory. I just don't know how steep that trajectory is.
All right. That was John Kavalik, Senior Editor at Issue Insight. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
All right, after the break, we'll take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to WANE News. Now, Baku Energy Week has wrapped up with talks focusing on energy security, gas production and export expansion, as Azerbaijan outlined plans to boost supplies to Europe and regional partners. Our correspondent Nuray Mustafa has more.
The discussions of Baku Energy Forum concluded at the Baku Convention Center with important energy projects and developments. The second day of the Baku Energy Week featured discussions focused on energy security, gas production, export expansion and energy transition. At the panel titled Leaders' Perspectives on Energy Transition and Future Strategies, Sokor President Roshan Najev said Azerbaijan plans to increase gas production and expand supplies to partner countries. It was noted that ensuring a reliable and sustainable energy supply remains one of the country's key priorities. The geography of Azerbaijan's gas exports continues to expand, with Syria now among the countries receiving Azerbaijani gas alongside Europe, Turkey and Georgia. Participants said partner countries remain interested in additional gas volumes. Azerbaijani gas was described as one of the region's most reliable energy sources. The possible expansion of the Southern Gas Corridor was also discussed as part of the efforts to increase gas supplies to Europe. It was noted that long-term gas purchase agreements and financial support are essential for the project. Updates were also provided on gas production projects. The Shahdenis compression project is ongoing, while first non-associated gas has been produced from the Azar-Churak Güneşli field. The Babek structure, the full development of the Absheron field and other projects are expected to bring additional gas volumes to the market in the coming years. The volumes will help meet domestic demand and support export growth. Speakers also highlighted Azerbaijan's long-term role in international energy markets. The country's energy infrastructure, export routes and production capacity were described as key strengths supporting future development. The impact of artificial intelligence and data centers on global energy demand was also discussed. It was noted that the growing use of these technologies could lead to higher energy consumption in the future, and assessment of their impact on energy markets are ongoing. The development of the Karabakh oil and gas field was also discussed. Sokar Vice President Babek Hüseyinov said that the project is being implemented using existing infrastructure. This approach is expected to shorten the investment cycle and enable faster production startup. It was also recalled that a new cooperation agreement on the Karabakh field was signed during Baku Energy Week. The field, located 120 kilometers east of Baku, is estimated to contain more than 60 million tons of geological oil reserves, including around 21 million tons of recoverable oil and 13 billion cubic meters of recoverable gas. In conclusion, important energy projects and developments brought the discussion of the Baku Energy Forum at the Baku Convention Center to a close. Baku Energy Week will conclude its program tomorrow. Nuray Mustafa, Zohrab Shirinov for E-News.
Now, deal-making, investment and energy security are dominating the agenda in Baku as international companies and policymakers come together for a second day of talks on the future of energy and regional connectivity. Gulchen Kuchalieva has more.
Energy security, investment and international cooperation are in focus as Baku Energy Week continues in its second day with a packed program of industry discussions and business engagement. At the Baku Expo Center, energy companies and technology providers are showcasing developments in oil and gas production, low-carbon solutions and energy infrastructure. The Caspian Oil and Gas and Caspian Power exhibitions remain key platforms for networking, deal-making and presenting technologies aimed at improving efficiency and sustainability. Thematic discussions also continue, including a panel on the Southern Gas Corridor and its role in regional energy security and supply diversification. Experts are examining the use of digital tools, automation and modern engineering in field development projects, while another session highlights the North-South and Middle Corridor routes and their growing importance for regional trade, logistics and energy connectivity.
Europe needs alternative supply, and Norway is already supplying gas at close to full capacity. The problem, of course, Europe can import more LNG, but we've seen how volatile the global market is at this time. Prices are high. There is a global shortage of LNG because of a crisis in the Middle East. So it does need to. It can't do everything. If it does remain committed to phasing out Russian gas, it needs an alternative supply, and Azerbaijan has the gas, it has the capacity to send more, it just needs the long-term commitments.
Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan is built very globally and very strategic partnership. It means that middle corridor for us and very secure for oil, to transition oil through middle corridor to deliver it to ocean. And so now it's developing. And if last year, for example, we delivered oil through 1.2 million tons, to this year it's maybe in the 1.6, maybe more than 2 million tons. It depends on situation. And so we see how the middle corridor is developing.
Beyond the formal sessions, the day is marked by ongoing business meetings and informal negotiations between Azerbaijan's energy institutions, international partners and major global companies active in the Caspian region.
Well, this is second year we are attending the Baku Energy Week, and it's very strong and successful exhibition for us. Last year we made a lot of friendships and partnerships, and this year we are improving these conditions. Regarding to the energy needs of Azerbaijan, I would like to tell that nowadays the renewable energy is very popular, and it's very important for the Azerbaijan also. Also, we are aware that fossil fuel sector in Azerbaijan is very strong and powerful. But all these fossil fuel companies who are dealing, they are also now entering the renewable energy sector.
As the program progresses, attention remains on strengthening cooperation, expanding infrastructure, and adapting to shifting global energy demands, with Baku reinforcing its position as a regional hub for energy policy, investment, and industrial development. Gülçin Hocalayeva, Avaz Hacıyev, A News.
Now, the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway has officially entered a new phase. Following a major modernization project, the upgraded line was commissioned today at a ceremony held in Akalkalaki, southern Georgia. Officials from Georgia, Azerbaijan and Turkey say the project significantly increases freight capacity and strengthens the middle corridor, the trade route linking Asia and Europe through the South Caucasus. Our correspondent reports from Georgia.
We are here in Akalkalaki, where representatives of Georgia, Azerbaijan and Turkey gathered to mark the commissioning of the modernized Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. The project is considered one of the most important transport infrastructure links in the South Caucasus and a key component of the middle corridor connecting China, Central Asia and Europe. According to Azerbaijan Railways, modernization works on the Georgian section have increased the railway's annual freight upgrade capacity from 1 million to 5 million tons. The project included the rehabilitation of railway stations, bridges, power systems and logistics infrastructure, as well as the construction of new rail segments and supporting facilities. Addressing the event, Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Qobakhidze and Economy Minister Mariam Kreushvili thanked Azerbaijan's Minister of Digital Development and Transport, Rashad Nabiev, for the close cooperation between the two countries throughout the project. Officials described the railway as an example of successful regional partnership.
This project, along with others, is the best demonstration of how closely our three countries cooperate with one another. This is a strategic partnership and a close friendship that binds us together. Of course, in the future, Georgia will continue to place great emphasis on implementing joint projects and deepening relations with both Azerbaijan and Turkey. This remains one of our top priorities.
This project also is very important from the regional cooperation. Three countries, Turkey, Georgia and Azerbaijan, jointly concluded and closed this project. So from the transit capacity perspective, this project is very important. And we hope that the benefits of this project will not be used only by the regional countries, but also starting from China and into Europe, all the countries which located across this road.
Beyond the railway itself, Georgian officials highlighted broader infrastructure development, including the Anaklia deep sea port and the East-West highway. Together, these projects are expected to strengthen Georgia's position as a regional transit and logistics hub and increase the competitiveness of the Middle Corridor. Speakers from all three countries emphasized that the significance of the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway extends beyond Georgia, Azerbaijan and Turkey. They noted that improved connectivity benefits all states participating in the Middle Corridor and stressed that stable, peaceful regional cooperation remains essential for unlocking the corridor's full economic potential. Nini Nikolaishvili, Achal Kalaki, A News.
Now, Central Asia's biggest environmental gathering is underway in Samarkand, bringing together thousands of delegates focused on climate, water and sustainability. The exhibition is also driving new regional partnerships. Our correspondent, Severa Rajapova, has the details.
The International Environmental Exhibition Eco-Expo Central Asia 2026 has officially opened in Samarkand. Organizers expect around 10,000 local and international participants this year. More than 68 pavilions are showcasing environmental technologies, green products and innovative solutions, while over 50 forums, presentations and side events are being held throughout the exhibition.
Our Central Asian region must unite and is already uniting in matters of ecology and environmental protection. As we know, environmental challenges do not recognize borders, which means that no country can solve them alone.
One of the key outcomes of the first day came during a discussion dedicated to the Aral Sea region. The National Committee on Ecology and Climate Change, the Ministry of Water Resources and the Ministry of Agriculture signed a concept plan for integrated water resource management in the lower Amu Darya basin. The document aims to improve water efficiency, strengthen environmental sustainability and support climate adaptation efforts in the region.
Like if we take Central Asia, the intensity of this heating or the climate change is double the global trends. So that's why we live in an arid region. We have some intensifying factors like Aral Sea, sun and dust storms. It is a big issue, but...
Another major side event marked the launch of a new global environment facility funded project aimed at establishing Uzbekistan's national biosafety system in line with the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. The initiative is expected to strengthen biodiversity protection and improve the country's environmental governance framework.
And we're actually inaugurating or launching a big regional project this week with Uzbekistan and all of its Central Asian neighbors, helping to tackle the common challenges associated with land and water management in the Sir Darya and the Amu Darya river basins.
The exhibition also featured discussions on Uzbek-Japanese cooperation in climate resilience, water management and green hydrogen technologies, as well as the presentation of Uzbekistan's fourth Environmental Performance Review, prepared by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Eco-Expo Central Asia 2026 is expected to strengthen international environmental partnerships, attract investment into green projects, and support sustainable development initiatives across the region. It is Cyril Rajab reporting from Samarkand, Uzbekistan, A News.
All right, after the break, we'll discuss the latest signal from Washington after President Donald Trump sent President Ilham Aliyev a memorandum extending the waiver of Section 907, accompanied by a personal handwritten message. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, a personal note from President Donald Trump to President Ilham Aliyev has attracted considerable attention at a time when relations between Washington and Baku appear to be improving. The gesture accompanied a memorandum extending the waiver of Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. Joining us now is Joseph Shumanov, Research Associate at the Turan Center and Non-Residence Research Fellow at the Chubashev Center, joining us from Chicago. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
Now, how unusual is it for a U.S. president to send a signed memorandum with a personal handwritten message to a foreign leader? And what signal should we read into it?
So thank you for having me once again. To answer your question, it is indeed a rarity and something interesting for Trump. Memoranda are usually domestic policy instruments or not typically sent to foreign leaders. For Trump to do this, it is really a sign of gratitude and signals that the recipient is part of what we might call, his preferred club of leaders. We have to understand that Trump tends to view foreign leaders almost as business affiliates, those who he works with well and those he does not. And whether one agrees with that approach or not, this gesture clearly indicates that President Aliyev is not now part of Trump's broader project abroad and someone he sees as an important partner moving forward.
Now, is the story, the real story here, the note itself, or the fact that Washington once again extended the waiver of Section 907?
Certainly the real story is not the waiver of Section 907. Since the late 90s, really, U.S. presidents have routinely waived Section 907. Of course, with the exception of the Biden administration, which in 2023 basically removed that presidential authority, effectively suspending it. The bigger story, of course, is the note itself, the message, Ilham, you are great, is classic Trump and serves as a public stamp of approval, really. It signals not only his positive view of Azerbaijan's leadership, but also his approval of the direction the relationship between the U.S. and Azerbaijan is taking. Again, the waiver is not important, but the note is what makes this particularly unique.
Now, what does this tell us about how the Trump administration currently views Azerbaijan's role in regional security and connectivity?
To say that it kind of, the terms of connectivity, I would say that the relationship is something that has to be understood as sort of a central node. Azerbaijan is the central node between Central Asia and Europe. Trump, as being a person who really has focused on connectivity, sees Azerbaijan as that central node between those two areas, and has courted it likewise, with the trip, with the strategic partnership, basically trying to coordinate it to ensure that Azerbaijan stays amenable to the United States in the long run, and it has really.
Yeah, that takes me to my next point. For years, Section 907 has been one of the most contentious issues in U.S.-Azerbaijan relations. Does this now finally put the chapter behind both countries?
I would say it certainly does not in terms of things on paper. What it does do is reverse the binary departure from the longstanding practice of presidential waivers. Trump has not done anything legally unprecedented here, aside from attaching the personal note, of course. So no, this is not permanently put the Section 907 issue behind either country. However, when viewed alongside the Trump administration's broader policy toward Azerbaijan, as I mentioned, TRIP, the strategic partnership, or the C6 framework that they're trying to develop, it is yet another piece of evidence that Washington and Baku are moving toward a much stronger relationship.
Now, how much does the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process influence the way the United States approaches Azerbaijan today?
I think this would really have to focus on President Aliyev. I think President Aliyev's willingness and fervor in pursuing the peace agreement under the Trump administration supervision was a telltale sign for Trump that Azerbaijan is not only willing to cooperate with the United States, but also sees America as a genuine leader in the emerging Afghan border. Just as importantly, like Azerbaijan demonstrated that it was willing to move quickly and make peace a reality. I guess you could call it sort of like a leap of faith, as it were. Where the United States is much more excited about and more amenable to keeping relations with them.
Now, if we see this as the beginning of a new chapter in the U.S. Azerbaijan relations, what should we watch out for next? Security cooperation, investment, energy, or something else?
I think we should watch for all of the above, really, but particularly connectivity and investment. Obviously, the strategic partnership that was signed between Azerbaijan and Washington was significant in that it kind of included security frameworks as well, as mentioned by VP Vance. The security cooperation will remain important, but it will be distinguished. His administration will be distinguished insofar as it emphasizes corridors, trade routes, and regional connectivity. We have already seen this through the Cheek Initiative, trying to link, obviously, Europe, the South Caucasus, Central Asia. But Azerbaijan occupies a unique strategic positions, in this regard. Sits at the crossroads of both of those regions, as I mentioned. But it also, of course, has strong relations with both China and Russia. And for the United States, this is not something of concern, but something of use, especially for the Trump administration's new strategic ambiguity or strategic partnerships with either China and Russia in terms of the broader multipolar world that is being formed.
Joseph, I have one more final question for you because we're running out of time. Some will see this as symbolism. Others will see it as diplomacy. In international politics, how much can personal chemistry between leaders actually matter?
That's a fantastic question. Traditionally, international relations or international politics scholars have paid relatively little attention to what we call the individual level or leader level of analysis, but it is difficult to measure and even more difficult to predict. For example, a leader like Trump. However, Trump has forced analysts to really take these dynamics much more seriously. His style of diplomacy, deeply personal relationships, handshakes, embraces, personal messages, and public compliments. It may seem small, but they often serve as a signal to the foreign policy community who is in favor and who is not. So personal chemistry can matter far more than many analysts would like to admit.
That was Joseph Shumanov, a research associate at the Tehran Center and non-resident research fellow at the Top Chubashev Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.